Hey, fight fans. Welcome to another edition of the CES podcast here on the CES website and social media. Thank you for making the CES podcast part of your day. I'm your host, Pat Sullivan, Director of Operations here at CES, joined as always by Steve Mays from Team CES, a man who literally wears many hats, usually of the CES or college football variety. But we are joined today by a very special guest, a man who literally wears many hats, although today he does have a nice Under Armour lid on. But we are joined by sportscaster of ABC and ESPN, Joe Tessitore. You know him as the voice and the face of World Championship Boxing and Top Rank Boxing on ESPN, and the host of my favorite show on network TV, ABC's Holy Moly. So thank you for joining us in the program today.
Pat and Steve, it's really nice to be with you. I appreciate the kind introduction, and all the duties that you list for me. We are soon returning to boxing, and I always find great comfort with our boxing brethren and our boxing family, but this week especially so, with such heartbreaking news that we've all been dealing with across our country and monitoring everything going on in our country, and I'm extremely sensitive to that. And we're sitting here in Connecticut right now, preparing for what's going to be a very busy month, 2 months ahead, with putting forth ESPN Boxing back on the air with the top-ranked shows. But in doing that, our crew and all of us, and Tim Bradley and Andre Ward and Mark Riggle and Bernardo Suda and the entire production team, we are gathering and talking and spending a lot of time not actually dealing with boxing right now, just dealing with everything that's going on in our country, and the full spectrum of ranges of emotion in everything that we're all seeing in the news, and just wanting to make sure that everybody on our crew knows that we care for each other greatly and that we're deeply concerned for each other. And that's first and foremost with us here. And I think boxing, for so many of us that have spent so many years of our careers in it, as you know, has been one of the great sports of inclusion, one of the great sports of trying to make sure that you have that sense of brotherhood and justice. It's a global sport. It's a sport that touches upon every rung on the socioeconomic ladder of race, religion, and that is at times very, very comforting in what has been an extremely uncomfortable week here in our country, and for many years, but here as everything has come to the forefront. So, before we get into any boxing discussion, I just want to let everybody know that those of us on ESPN Boxing, that is really where our heart and mind is right now, of just wrapping our arms around each other, having some really good, thoughtful, and great conversations, and just being really present for each other on our crew as we get ready to get back to work.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate you bringing that up and making that statement there before we get into the podcast. And initially, we started this podcast because we couldn't bring live fights to the fans, either in the ring or the cage, in either our boxing or MMA division. And we hoped that this podcast would serve as a needed distraction to those fight fans who needed to not think about coronavirus and not refresh the Twitter on the CDC and everything. But I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a whole different element of distraction going on right now, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So let's transition now into another welcome distraction, which is live sports. And we haven't really had any of it aside from a couple of UFC fights, a couple of charity golf events, some race car, but now we have live boxing. Yeah. And I really like this format that we have. It's going to be, I think you have 6 or 7 fights in 2 weeks, and they're all taking place with no fans. Very limited attendance as far as cornermen and everything else. But they're going to be missing a few other people ringside, and that's you. But the fans at home aren't going to be missing you, because you're going to be broadcasting from Bristol via an international feed. So I want to get your take on this. We talked to Mauricio Sulaiman last week about maybe having judges doing stuff like this virtually, where watching the fight from an international feed, because maybe it's less people traveling, but you also get a different view when you're watching on TV instead of, looking up through the ropes at one angle. So I want your take on this, I guess, first. If you think you might be able to see the sport differently by watching it on an international feed. I know you obviously look through the ropes, but you have your monitor that you're watching. But Do you anticipate any challenges, or is this something that you're excited to do? Your take on doing this from Bristol?
Well, Pat, it definitely is a challenge, and it's not going to be as easy as it typically is. A couple things, and you undo some of the layers of the onion there. The remote judging, I do not support. Now, I do support, obviously, the health and safety of everybody in the operations of conducting the sport, but we both know that judging a fight ringside is very different than judging a fight off TV. First of all, you have 3 different vantage points, which you have to have so that you can clearly see the fight in its totality. Secondly, we all know that even if you're 10 feet back, 20 feet back, the difference in what you're able to pick up on what is an effective punch when you're right there and you can hear the thud, see the thud, understand the impact, you really have the ability to understand effective punching, clean and effective punching, which is the primary concern and the pillar of scoring. So for somebody like me, somebody like Andre Ward and Tim Bradley broadcasting the fight, when you broadcast boxing, you're not your typical play-by-play person, or you really have to be almost equal analyst as you are blow-by-blow and play-by-play. So we're going to do our best to broadcast these fights, and we're really well prepared to do that. But undoubtedly, I can give you a better read on the fight, and I can document what's happening and give you better analysis, and even my inflection and my tone, which then you're able as the viewer to infer what exactly is happening, who's winning, how impactful something was. It is better ringside. There's just no doubt about that. We'll do a really good TV production. We're well equipped to do that. You know, I'm sitting there in Bristol. We have the full arsenal of everything we need to do a good TV broadcast. Mark Riggle is creating amazing essays and stories. Andre and Tim, I think, have blossomed into the 2 best analysts that the game has right now currently. We're blessed to have great analysts across the board on all TV networks in our sport specifically. I think you have to have among the highest sports functioning IQs to be a boxing analyst, because there isn't something right in front of you that you can lean on. It's not obvious. There's not down and distance and yardage and statistics. You have to know what you're seeing and be able to read it. But undoubtedly, you know what you're seeing and you're able to read it when you are 18 inches away from the ropes compared to 2,700 miles.
Yeah, I know, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that Andre and Tim do a really good job, and I think it's going to be a really exciting team. You know, and going on that theme of you 3 calling the fight together, boxing has, I don't want to say taken a step back from the mainstream, but I think with the rise of the UFC and with some of the boxing contracts on TV, maybe it hasn't been as easy to find some of these big fights as we used to have back in the day. So I think right now, boxing coming back the way it is with so many fights in such a short span of time on ESPN where people can find it easily. You got a great broadcast booth. I think the fight matchups are going to be really good. Is this something that you see could really bring boxing back to the forefront, where people are now anticipating and looking forward to the next fight, not just the big marquee Wilder Fury fights or the next Mayweather fight, but just the next fight in general? Like, people get excited about what's the next college football game. It doesn't matter who's playing. They just want to watch it. Maybe this is a time where sport fans really need some live action. You know, of course, there's the gambling aspect of it again, where now gambling's legal in many states on many apps, and now you can gamble on the fights. Maybe what is happening this upcoming week on ESPN is the start of bringing boxing back to be one of the main sports.
I think you and Steve would agree that simply the opportunity of having primetime real estate on ESPN multiple times a week is a wonderful opportunity for not just the Shakur Stevensons, but prospects and folks on the way up. This is unprecedented. We're coming on the air at 7 o'clock on ESPN on Tuesday night, and we'll probably be off the air somewhere in the vicinity of 11 or even after 11 o'clock. So here you have this entire canvas for the sport to paint on in prime time with a lot of promotion. And unlike most fight cards, and I will respectfully disagree with you in terms of bringing boxing back, I actually think for those of us in the sport, we think of that because when it was in the world of premium cable and pay-per-view, it was thought of as being on this amazing platform.
Right.
It was amazing for us. It was not amazing for the rest of the world. Boxing in the course of the last 2 to 3 years, now that it is on ESPN, ESPN Plus consistently, now that it's on Fox, Fox FS1 and pay-per-view there, still on Showtime, and on the streaming service DAZN, has more exposure, more outlets, is easier to access and easier to understand than it ever has been before when it spent most of its life in the corner of premium cable with HBO, who did a superb job of being the standard bearer and the documentarians of the sport, but it stayed in their little universe.
Sure.
And now you have more entry level exposure, and that's what you're going to see on Tuesday night. On Tuesday night, you're going to see Robeisy Ramirez in just his 4th pro fight. Well, that wouldn't have happened if we're only showing the main event and the co-feature, if it was in premium cable. You're going to see 2 heavyweight prospects in Guido Vianello, right, and in Jared Anderson. You're going to see a swing bout that'll make air. You're going to see Michaela Mayer. So those opportunities now exist, and they're existing on ESPN in primetime on a weeknight. So I agree with you in saying it's a wonderful opportunity. Mm-hmm. What I also think is a great opportunity is the frequency, because you have this tidal wave of boxing coming at you Tuesday night on ESPN, and then 48 hours later, here it comes again. Here comes Jesse Magdaleno, and here comes more prospects, and here comes the kid Brian Alua, who I'm very high on, who's 5-0 out of California, Mexican-American, who I think's got a great future ahead of him. And, more opportunity. And then 4 days after that, here comes it. And so you're going to have the frequency. And that frequency is a little more familiar of perhaps a boxing fan of my age or older of what we had in the 70s into the early 80s when network TV and then the emergence of ESPN with the Top Rank series was more aligned, where you saw boxing more consistently, and that's what you're gonna have. So I do agree that it's a wonderful opportunity and launching pad for many fighters that otherwise wouldn't get it.
Joe, you were just talking about Tim Bradley and Andre Ward and how they're great analysts with you, and it's just a great booth, and it really is. But talk about Teddy Atlas. Talk about working next to somebody who was just a boxing guy through and through.
Steve, it's very simple to say. He is, I will tell people, it was like having, the PhD professor. I was blessed for, a decade and a half of having, aside from the fact that obviously of having Teddy and his family and my family's life, which is a great gift. It's like having the ultimate professor as you're going through graduate school and then getting your doctorate in the sport by your side, embedded with you every week on the road forever and ever and ever. So from a boxing IQ standpoint, unparalleled, absolutely unparalleled. So, I mean, it's as simple as that.
Between he must have had stories off the air that were just unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I mean, just
Tyson and Cuss and just unbelievable.
Well, so many years of our life coming over to you guys in Providence and putting on great shows and just, amazing. But life on the road with Teddy for those years of my career is absolutely invaluable. You can't put a price tag on what that education for me was like. And I've expressed that to him numerous times. I'm forever grateful for that. It was having the ultimate professor by your side to give you your schooling on the sport at that level.
That's awesome.
So we now transition from Teddy Atlas to the new professor that you work with, Mr. Rob Riggle, who may not have his PhD in boxing or anything like that, but he is such a character for, and the two of you just play off each other so well on the TV show, Holy Moly, which if you haven't seen it, fans watching at home, you have to find that first season and watch it. It is tremendous comedy. It's great show. It's basically mini golf combined with the ABC show Wipeout. You have to putt the ball and then you might get electrocuted or lit on fire. And it's definitely binge worthy. It's my favorite show on TV. I wait every week for it to come on. But Joe, let's talk about that first. I guess, have you had the opportunity to play any of those holes yet?
Pat, I got out on some of the greens, but there's no way you're getting me into those death-defying traps. I mean, I sit there every week, and Rob. First of all, I think Rob Riggle is hysterical. All the movies, all the comedy he's done through the years, and it just his role in The Hangover alone. But I have not gotten. You're never going to get me on the high-powered zip line that goes into a totem pole or gets smashed by a windmill going 25 miles an hour into freezing cold water. Or, tonight, I think on tonight's episode, we're taping this on a day when Holy Moly airs on ABC. On tonight's episode, I believe there's a mechanical gopher that's positioned 25, 30 feet up in the air. And then obviously you do all these death-defying feats, and people get smashed and concussed and thrown into the water just to get a better ball placement on a green.
Right.
But I have done some of the putting. I mean, there was that one hole that I know everybody's talking about this year, hole number 2, where you have to run past the porta potties on a very slim land, and then you get smashed in the face. I mean, literally, you're running full speed, and somebody opens a porta potty door right into your face, and then you go into the water. But I have putted on that hole, and it is impossible with the, it's the undulating green and the ridges, and then my kids came out and embarrassed themselves. I got college age kids, and they came out and embarrassed themselves. But here's the deal with that.
Yep.
I sit back, I'm a boxing expert and broadcaster, and then, I broadcast Monday Night Football, and now I'm going to be transitioning down the road here back to college football, and, spent my career as a football expert and all this stuff. Holy Moly gives me the opportunity to simply laugh and do comedy on TV, and that is very welcome in my career, because the scrutiny of broadcasting primetime football and primetime boxing, we know what that's about. We know how prepared you have to be. We know the research that goes into it. We know the scrutiny of fans watching. It is really nice to spend part of my year sitting there with Rob Riggle and filming a buddy comedy at the end of the day, just laughing our asses off nonstop. So we have a lot of fun with it, and I'm really happy that you enjoy it too. It's funny, the feedback that you get from the show. First of all, the show, as you know, is heavily promoted by ABC. Commercials run all the time. The show, thank God, because I'm so happy for the crew and everybody that's put the hard work into it, gets really good ratings.
Yep.
And then, here you spend all these years and you're broadcasting an NFL playoff game in front of 36 million people, and you're doing the college football playoff, and you're doing the heavyweight championship of the world. And I swear to God, I'll call up, the pest and, exterminator from my house. And I'm talking to the guy, and he recognizes the name, the voice, and he says, "Wait a minute, you're the host of Holy Moly." And it's like, if you ever told me that in my career, I've been on TV for 25 years, doing, where tens of millions of people, from broadcasting, the Belmont and the Triple Crown on the line, to the NFL playoffs, to the college football, to the heavyweight championship of the world. If you ever told me that people are going to recognize me for doing extreme mini golf, I would say, "What, are you crazy?" And that's my new reality. So, in a time in our country where we've been dealing with such death and hardship and now social injustice, it's the one thing where for an hour of the week I can sit back and laugh.
Yeah, and,
so
and take it for who watches the show weekly, it's definitely a great hour that we get to spend just kind of laughing and having fun. And I will say that I have submitted my tape and my name for season 2, which I didn't get on in season 3. So I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, Joe, and hopefully you can, if you're not going to call me in the boxing ring, maybe you can call one of my putts on the course. But this is one question that I have that I think you're the only person qualified to answer it, as the elite sportscaster for mini golf, but also the father of a son who's a place kicker at Boston College in Division I. So here's my question. The winner of Holy Moly gets to putt for $250,000. What's a more precious situation, putting for $250,000 on national TV, or kicking a game-winning field goal with a big contest on the line in college football?
Well, so, John plays up at BC for Coach Halfley, just up the road from you. And he's been a place kicker, a punter, and a kickoff guy in his prep school and now college career. Now he's a full-time punter. But when he went up there as a triple guy, as a combo guy.
Sure.
But his freshman year, the very first game of Boston College's season that year, the senior place kicker had a groin injury. And all of a sudden, my 18-year-old son, who's on his first week of college, is now got to be the starting kicker at 18 years old. He thought he was going to get redshirted, and now all of a sudden he's the starting kicker. And their very next game is on national TV in prime time, the Thursday night ESPN game on the road. They're at Wake Forest.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here saying, I can't believe. So now I fly down to Wake Forest, and I'm saying, now, you know, everything I've done in my career, and you know the amount of live television I've done and the amount of eyeballs that have watched me in these pressure situations of doing that. I will only say the only thing that's relatable is to my career is I am never nervous going on live TV. I'm unaffected of doing anything in my job that most people would think is pressure filled. The most nervous I've ever felt in my life is watching my son having to run out into the field at 18 years old,
Sure.
knowing the bright lights, national TV, stadium. So I don't know how he does that, but he's seemingly unaffected. Now that he's a full-time punter, he's got to deal with all these ACC athletes trying to come and kill him on every snap of the ball, which I'll let his mom tell you what that feels like someday. But we taped the Holy Moly season finale. And I will tell you this, the golfers who had to attempt the $250,000 putt, which is like no hole you've ever seen. You have to hit a hole in one, and it's one of the longest putts you've ever seen.
Yep.
I don't know that in all my years of being around sports, I have ever seen people crack under pressure more. There were moments that were brilliant, but there were moments that were unbelievably revealing.
Yeah.
So mental composure. I know we laugh about Holy Moly being sort of this buddy comedy. It's hysterical and all the wipeout elements to it and all the comedy baked in. But pressure is pressure in sports. And mental composure, you can be really talented, but your mental composure is so critical. We know that in boxing. I know that through all my years of football and watching my son compete at, the highest level of college football now. But I'm telling you, it even appears and reveals itself in extreme mini golf. I'm telling you, it's crazy.
Wow. So Joe, I planned on asking you what, your favorite boxing event was that you ever called, but listening to you say, the Triple Crown and national title and college football, and which Pat and I are huge college football fans.
Right.
What was your favorite event that you ever called? Whether it was boxing, football, whatever it was, what was your favorite event that you ever called that after you called it, you were just wowed?
Yeah, you're feeling it. I've been blessed with so many, Steve, that have been thrilling, really thrilling. In college football, there was the famous Boise State when they were undefeated and had Kellen Moore, and Nevada when they had Colin Kaepernick, and both thought perhaps it was going to be a Cinderella story, and they played on Thanksgiving weekend, game that went so deep into the night in double overtime and had multiple missed field goals and Hail Mary catches, and it was beyond belief, that game. There was a 4 overtime game I did on ABC with Penn State and Michigan years ago with Matt Millen that was beyond belief. There was the famous ABC Texas double overtime game in primetime on ABC I did one year that was beyond belief. Those really stand out. There were a few others too. I mean, when Oklahoma State thought they were going to play for the national title at the end of the season, they got upset by a 28-point underdog in Iowa State. Won again double overtime. It was amazing. When RG3 beat Oklahoma, who had been number 1 in the country on a last-second pass, Millen and I did that game. That was a primetime ABC game. It was amazing. I mean, you just walk out of the booth. I'll never forget Aaron Andrews. Aaron was my sideline reporter, and Aaron got the Gatorade got dumped on it on EA. And then, the two of us are getting back in the car, and she's just, she's blue. And, and this is like college football creates these incredible moments. Those stand out. In boxing, it's not always the championship fight. I mean, doing Wilder Fury for the heavyweight championship of the world, it's a thrilling week of work. I would tell you, even doing, I don't know if you remember the press conference that week up on stage when the two of them almost brawled and I was left up there in between the two of them having to settle them down for an hour. Yeah. Even the non-fight stuff can be memorable. That was very memorable for me. But in boxing, there can be a 4-round swing fight that blows me away. There could be an off-TV fight that is very memorable to me. Boxing takes you to a different place. It doesn't always have to be about the magnitude and the reach and the relevance. It's two guys who are extending themselves to a place that you're in awe of. Is what, obviously, I mean, a lot of us have been in some of the classic fights, called them, been there ringside. I mean, we've been blessed as guys in New England to have a lot of those fights in our backyard. Gaddy Ward, I was there ringside, Sheikah and Pemberton, and Manuel Augustus, and Willie Gibbs at Foxwoods. There are fights that stay with me. Horse racing, Zenyatta in the Breeders' Cup getting beat, Big Brown easing up when I was calling it on ABC with the Triple Crown on the line at the Belmont. We were just jaws dropped. There's so many moments in horse racing through the years that I've been a part of. It's hard to name one. But you know it when you feel it, because it's something that sports can do and few other things in our life can, where you're sitting there saying, I can't believe what I just saw. Right. And you're really taken by the greatness of what of the human spirit and what somebody can decide to do or push the limits of what they're capable of.
Yeah. So we appreciate your time here on the podcast, and I know you're a busy guy, so I'm gonna let you go after one more thought here. And as you can see in my background here, I'm a big college football guy. I love boxing, but I'm passionate about college football. So really excited to talk to you about this topic, because I know you've got quite the history and very knowledgeable about the sport. As you can see back here, there's a picture of me wearing a Bear Bryant hat.
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
Any stadium.
Yeah.
Yep. When I went to go see Alabama play in 2016. But before I went, I watched a special third Eagle, which you are an executive producer on. And it gives a lot of insight onto Alabama and Auburn as the football team. And, you watch the NFL and the field's just covered in Alabama and Auburn, alumni. But you realize from watching that documentary the passion that's in the fan base and how important college football is to these schools. And if it weren't for Alabama and Auburn football, their university would be completely different. I know the president of Alabama said Nick Saban is the greatest investment the school's ever made. So I want to get your input on the upcoming college season. There's still a lot of questioning about whether the season will happen, how it will happen, if it's still going to be a 12-game schedule. But I know it's very important for these institutions that the players are obviously safe, but also that they play football, because otherwise their budgets are going to be cut significantly throughout the athletic department. The school is going to suffer. So if you can give us some insight on your thoughts on what's going to happen in college football in 2020.
Listen, we live in a world where the news cycles are on hyperwarp, so a lot can change. But as it stands right now, and we're having this conversation, I anticipate a college football season. I anticipate, a university leadership that understands how important it is to have the on-campus experience, to have the fullest education, not of student athletes, of every student. Right. And with that, college football plays a critical role in the campus environment, especially among the Power 5 conference teams. And I fully anticipate there will be a college football season. Now, it may only be a conference college football season. It may be a 9-10 game season. But I do believe, especially at the Power 5 level, among those 65 schools, that you will absolutely see a college football season, and you will see one that is televised by Fox and NBC and ESPN and ABC.
Yeah, well, Joe, and lastly, a leading expert on the Heisman Trophy presentation, the award, and everything was Joe Burrow's season in 2019 the greatest Heisman year in the Heisman Trophy history?
Well, I think we always have the recency bias of saying what we just saw was the greatest this and the greatest that. It was a superb year, and statistically it was phenomenal. And then you're undefeated, and you're the star quarterback, and your team's rolling through. So, yes, it's among the greatest slam dunk, no-brainer lock Heismans of all time. But, Barry Sanders was pretty good too. Yeah. A lot of guys were pretty good too. And, the helmet that's hanging behind you there in 1984, a certain guy from Natick, Massachusetts was pretty magical too. And there have been a lot of wonderful, the Heisman is different because it's not just an MVP. It's not just a statistical year. It's got an it quality to it. It has a magic feel to it. And not every Heisman year is like that, but there have been a lot of Heisman years where you say that was beyond words, that was just everything wrapped in the special qualities of college football, all wrapped into that person's season, just materialized with that Heisman right there. And we've had a lot of those through the years. But what Burrow did last year, statistically, performance-wise, and having that it quality, that magic factor that we talk about, it was pretty evident.
Well, Joe, in a time in this world where it's really hard to find live entertainment, it's not hard to find Joe Tessitore on TV. He's got Holy Moly. He's got all the ESPN boxing fights coming up. And, of course, here on the CES podcast. Joe, we really, really appreciate you joining us today. I was a communication major when I went to college, and in 2008, right before I graduated, my TV producer sat me down and said, you got to watch some of the greats in the sport and how they broadcast. So I listened to Johnny Most, famous Celtics broadcaster, and I watched a lot of your fights to kind of get the rhythm and the flow of broadcasting a live fight. And ironically enough, I had watched you broadcast some CES fights, and then a month later I joined CES. So it's funny how this comes full circle, but it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And we look forward to watching you call some of the crazy antics on Holy Moly, and hopefully some of the best boxing fights we're going to see in a long time on ESPN.
Okay, Pat and Steve, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the time, especially at the top of our conversation, to just pause and acknowledge, where our hearts and minds are. That's very, very important to us. This is one of those weeks where I'm not doing any interviews at all. I'm really just trying to be very sensitive to everything going on in our country and make sure that I'm staying present with those who are most important to me on our crew and within our family in this kind of unified force to get through everything our country is dealing with. But you gave me the invitation, so I did want to take the time to join you guys because you guys have been so loyal to the sport for so long, and the role that you play in my backyard has been very important to me for many, many years.
Well said, Joe. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Podcast partner Steve Mays and the producer Andre Griffith and everyone at Team CES. Thank you for joining and watching another edition of the CES podcast. We'll see you next week, my fans.